So students, in today's session, we are going to learn about active and passive voice. Okay. So before we start, can anybody tell me what is active and passive voice?
It is a type of voice which we use.
Okay, it's not that voice. Can anybody else try? What is an active and passive voice?
Can I say something?
It's two types of ways and
Okay. So, okay. Not active and passive. Can anybody tell me what is a voice? Yes?
Voice is the sentence we are using.
Spellings? No,
it's
not
ways of conversing.
Sorry?
Ways of conversing.
Conversation? No. Okay. Yeah. So basically, voice is nothing but it is a form of verb. Okay. This is a form of verb that indicates whether the subject of a sentence performs the action or receives the action. Okay. So voice is what? It is a form of verb. Okay, remember this thing. Voice is a form of verb that indicates whether the subject of a sentence is performing the action or receiving the action, right? So basically what happens in a sentence, you'll be having a subject, right? And that subject will be doing some kind of work, right? So we'll have a verb in the sentence plus an object that is receiving the action, isn't it? Yes or no, students?
Yes.
Yeah, so basically a sentence consists of a subject plus verb plus object. Okay, subject, verb, and object. So what this voice does, it indicates whether this subject is performing the action. Verb means action, right? Whether this is performing an action on the object or whether it is receiving the action from the object. Okay, so basically if the subject is doing some action, then we can say, tell that the given sentence is in the active voice. Okay, if the subject of a sentence is receiving the action from the object, then we can say the given sentence is in the passive voice. Okay, so first thing that you have to understand about the active and passive voice is, first you should be knowing what is a voice. Okay, based on that, you can classify whether it is an active voice or passive voice. Okay, so voice is a form of verb that indicates whether the subject is doing the action or receiving the action. Okay, so based on that, we have classified the voices into two types. Okay, so we have two types of voices in English language. What are those? Active voice and passive voice. Okay, understood everybody?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, clear with voice first? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
The voice? Okay. Next. So what I told you, if the subject is doing some action, okay, if the action is done by the subject, okay, if the subject is doing some action, then we can say the given sentence is in the active voice. Okay, for example, if I take the example like Sita eats an apple, somebody anyone tell me what is the subject here in this sentence?
Sita. Sita.
Yes, Sita is our subject. Okay, now tell me what is the verb in this sentence?
Eats.
Yes, eats is our verb. Now tell me the object.
Apple.
Yes, apple is our object. So basically our sentence is consisting of subject plus verb plus object, right? And if you notice in this sentence, this Sita, our subject, is doing some action on this object, apple, right? Sita eats an apple. So from this example, you can clearly understand that the subject Sita is doing some action on this object apple, right? Clear, everybody?
Yes,
Yes?
ma'am.
Come on, everybody. Just
Yes, ma'am.
are you getting?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So here, this is the thing where the subject is doing some action. Okay. Then that we can call that sentence as an active voice. Okay. If the action is done to the subject, it means if the subject is receiving the action. Okay. If the subject is receiving the action from the object, then we can say that the given sentence is in the passive voice. Okay? For example, an apple is eaten by Sita. So first tell me, what is the subject here? Anyone? In this sentence, an apple
Sita.
is eaten by
Sita.
Sita. What is the subject?
Sita.
Sita.
Sita is our subject.
An apple. An apple.
Apple. Okay, apple is our subject. What is subject? That appears at the beginning of the sentence about which something is being said. Okay, that is called subject. It appears at the very beginning of the sentence. Okay, so apple is our subject. Okay, now tell me, what is the object here?
Sita.
Yes, now Sita is our object here. Okay, this is our subject and this is our object. Okay, so now what is said in this sentence? An apple is eaten by Sita. Okay, so now tell me whether this subject is doing some action or receiving some action from this object. Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, can anybody tell me whether the subject is doing the action here or receiving the action?
Receiving the action.
Receiving action.
Yes, very good. So here our subject apple is receiving the action done by the object Sita. Okay, Sita is doing again the action here. But this Sita is object here in this sentence. And our subject apple is receiving the action from the object Sita. Okay, so if the action is received by the subject, then we can say that the given sentence is in the passive voice. Clear, everyone?
Yes.
Everyone. Okay, if the subject does the action, then we can say that that given sentence is in the active voice. If the subject is receiving the action, okay, then we can say that the given voice is in the passive voice. Understood, everybody? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now, when we have to change this active voice into passive voice, what are the rules that we have to follow? Okay, so basically to convert an active voice into passive voice, you have 4 important rules that you have to follow. Okay, so what are those 4 rules? The first rule says, place the object of an active voice in place of subject. Okay, so basically what is the structure of a sentence? Subject plus verb plus object, right? So now when you have to change this sentence from active voice into passive voice, what is the first rule? It is asking us to place the object of active voice in place of subject in passive voice. So what you have to do? You have to put this object in place of subject in the passive voice. Okay, so suppose this is our passive voice that we have to make from the active voice. So what you have to do? You have to place the object of the active voice in place of the subject, that is at the very beginning. Okay, this is the rule number 1. Now the rule number, yes,
I didn't understand the first one.
this first line.
Yeah.
Okay,
No,
see.
no. I didn't understand.
Okay. So when you have to change the active voice into the passive voice, you have to follow 4 rules. Okay. So first rule says, place the object of active voice in place of subject in the passive voice. Okay. If we'll go to the next slide, you'll understand it better. Okay. If suppose this is your sentence in the active voice. Okay. This one is your active voice. So the structure of this sentence will be like subject plus verb in the first or second form plus object, right? Understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Okay, now
ma'am.
when you have to change that into the passive voice, then you have to follow the 4 rules. Okay, so the first rule says, put the object of active voice in place of subject of passive voice. So this is the place of subject, right? Understood? Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So what you have to do according to the first rule, you have to place the object of active voice in place of subject of passive voice. Okay, this is our first rule. Understood, everybody?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Now go to the
Yes,
second rule. Okay, now the second rule says, according to the tense of active voice. What do you mean by that? You have 3 tenses, right? past tense, present tense, and future tense, right? Yes?
Yes. Yes.
The given
Yes.
sentence will be either in the past tense or in the present tense or in the future tense, right? So, second rule says, according to the tense of active voice, you have to use the auxiliary verbs in the passive voice. Okay, let's go to the next slide again. So, rule number 2 says, first identify the tense of active voice. Okay, whether it is in the present tense or past tense or in future tense. Okay, and once you identify the tense of the active voice, you have to use the auxiliary verbs. What are auxiliary verbs now? Is, or, am, are, was, were. All these are called as has, have. They all are called as auxiliary verbs, right? So,
Yes.
depending upon your sentence, whether it is in the present tense, past tense, or future tense, you have to use this auxiliary verbs: is, am, are, was, were, has, or have. Okay, that is about this. That is our second rule. Okay, next rule number 3 says, always put the main verb. Okay, put the main verb in past participle form of verb. What is this past participle form of verb? We have 3 forms of verbs, right? V1, V2, V3. For example, eat, ate, eaten, right? These are the 3 forms of verbs, right? So, what the rule number 3 is saying? Yes,
Ma'am,
yes,
I am doubt.
yes. Tell me. What's your doubt?
Doubt. Ma'am, doubt is जब जब उसमें वर्ब लगाते हैं जब जिन्हें एक्टिव पॉजिटिव वर्ड है ना एक्टिव वर्ड ना because at and passive voices
Sorry, I didn't get it. Can you repeat again? Yes. Okay. So, our rule number 3 says, always put the main verb in the past participle form of verb. That is, you have to use V3 form of verb in your passive voice. Okay. So, if you go to the next slide again, here you have the verb form either in the first form or in the second form in your active voice. Now, when you change that into passive voice, you have to use the third form of verb in your passive voice. Okay, understood, everyone? This is our rule number 3. Yes, students, are you getting it?
Ma'am,
Yes.
I understand the
yes
third
ma'am
rule.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now let's go back to the 4th rule. Okay, so now what is the 4th rule? 4th rule says, convert the subject of active voice into the object of passive voice and put by before it. Okay, so the last rule says, we are done with the first, second, and third rule, right? We are done with the subject, what to do with the verb in the passive voice. Now we are left with the object part, right? Where to place this object in your passive voice? It has to be placed in the place of object. Okay, so this subject has to be placed in place of object in your passive voice and put by before it. Okay, this is our rule number 4. Understood, everybody?
Yes, ma'am.
yes ma'am
Everyone.
Yes, ma'am.
Very important.
What
Okay, this
if we
is
need to
very
change the
important
passive?
to understand. Yes.
Ma'am, what if we need to change the passive voice into active voice, ma'am?
What is the
Then how should we change passive voice into active voice?
same way like how we have to how we are converting active voice into passive voice? The same rule you have to follow back. If you have the auxiliary verb like is, as, is, or was, then you have to understand that it is in the passive voice and you have to convert that into the active voice. Okay, understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now, if you take the example, Sita eats an apple. The same example we will take. Okay, so this is in the active voice because the Sita subject is doing some action on your object. Okay. So now, when we are using these 4 rules, we have to convert this active voice into the passive voice, then according to these 4 rules, you have to first put the
Sana, ma'am.
object. Yes, ma'am.
Jay has some doubt. Yes, Jay, please go on.
Okay. Yes, Jay. Yes.
Can you explain again that how can we change active voice to passive?
Okay. So basically, when you have to convert active voice into the passive voice, you have to follow the 4 rules. Okay. So what are those 4 rules? The first rule says, see, basically the structure of your sentence is like subject plus verb plus object, right? This is the basic structure of any sentence. Yes. So now, when you are converting this into the passive voice, you have to follow these 4 rules. Okay. What are those 4 rules? It is saying us place the object of active voice in place of subject in passive voice. If suppose this is your active voice. Okay. This is your active voice. Okay. This is your active voice where you have subject plus verb plus object. Okay, when you are converting this into the passive voice. So what you have to do, the first rule says place this object in place of subject. Okay, this comes here according to the rule number 1. Understood? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, now the second rule says according to the tense of this active voice. Okay, whether it is in the present tense or it is in the past tense or in the future tense, depending on that, you have to use auxiliary verbs like is or are if the given sentence is in the present tense, was or were if the given tense is in the past tense, like will, like that if the given tense in active voice is in the future tense. Okay, accordingly you have to use the auxiliary verbs here in your passive voice. Understood? This is rule number 2.
Yes.
Yes. Now, the rule number 3 says, here in your active voice, the main verb will be either in V1 form or in V2 form. Okay. So, when you are changing that into the passive voice, you always have to use V3 form of verb only. This is our third rule. Okay. Clear until here to everybody? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now,
Yes,
the
ma'am.
last part, we are left with subject. Where to place this subject now in your passive voice? So this has to be placed in place of object. Okay. This is the 4th rule. And before that, simply put by. Okay. So these are the 4 rules that everybody has to remember to convert the active voice into the passive voice. Clear, everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now,
Yes, ma'am.
if we take this example, Sita eats an apple. Here, Sita is our subject that is performing some action on the object apple. Okay, if we follow these 4 rules, how we can convert the active voice into passive voice? First thing is place the object in place of subject. So here we have placed the object of the active voice in place of subject. This is according to the rule number 1. Now, Sita eats an apple. This is in the simple present tense. Isn't it? This given tense in active voice is in the simple present tense. If the given tense is in the simple present tense, then use is or are or am according to your subject. Okay. So apple is singular and the given tense is in the simple present tense. So use is as your auxiliary verb. This is our rule number 2. Okay. Now, rule number 3 says, use V3 form of verb always in your passive voice. Okay. So what is the V3 form of ate, eat, and eaten? These are the 3 different forms of verbs, right? V1, V2, and this is our V3. So you have to use V3 in our passive voice. So use eaten here. Okay. And apple is eaten. So this is our rule number 3. Clear, everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Now,
ma'am.
we are left with subject. Where to place this subject? In place of object in your passive voice. Okay. So this is our rule number 4. And before that, simply put by. Okay. These are the 4 rules that help you to convert the active voice into the passive voice. Clear, everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So well, let us see how we can use the auxiliary verbs in different tenses. Okay. So before that, one more thing we have to understand that, yeah, while changing the object of active voice into the subject of passive voice, the personal pronouns are changed as follow. For example, if you have I as your subject in your active voice, like I like chocolate. Okay, I like chocolates. Okay, if I write this thing, I is our subject here, like is our verb, and chocolate is our object. Okay, so when we convert this into the passive voice, it becomes like chocolates. Okay, chocolates are liked by me. If you follow all these 4 rules, then the given active voice I like chocolates changes into chocolates are liked by me. So here if you see, this I has changed to me in your passive voice, isn't it? Yes, students?
Yes, ma'am. I understand. And I
Okay.
understood it.
Likewise, the other pronouns also change like this. Like I changes to me, we changes to us, he changes to him, she changes to her, they changes to them, you remain same as you, and it also remains as it. Okay, this
Ma'am,
is
can you show an
important thing that you
example
have
for
to
you?
remember. Yes,
Can you show an example for you?
yes, you can. You're welcome to say an example. Yes.
Oh, ma'am, I want you to tell one example.
Okay. Using you as pronoun.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So if I say I like you, okay, then the same thing will remain in the past tense. You are liked by me. Okay, you remain same. Okay, okay. So now let us see, when your active voice is in different tense, what are the auxiliary verbs that you have to use. Okay, so now if you have your active voice in your simple present tense, okay, this is the active voice that is in the simple present tense. Like the structure remains like subject plus first form of verb and object. Okay, then your passive voice should have the structure like object plus you have to use is, am, or are as your helping verbs, plus past participle form of verb V3. Okay, and then by plus subject. This should be your structure for your passive voice when your active voice is in simple present tense. Okay, for example, Rohit waters the plants. Okay, Rohit is your subject, waters is your first form of verb, and plants is your object. Okay, so now when you convert that into the passive voice by following the 4 rules, the example becomes the plants are watered by Rohit. Okay, the object becomes subject here in your passive voice according to the rule number 1. And as your subject is plural, use are as your auxiliary verb. That is your rule number 2. And then rule number 3, use V3 form of a verb. Okay, so water, watered. Okay, this is your rule number 3. And then put the subject in place of object and put by before it according to rule number 4. Clear, everybody?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Everyone.
I
Okay,
did
so
not
now
understand the active voice one, ma'am.
which one?
Active voice, ma'am.
Active voice. See, active voice, what we are doing is, here we are taking, if your active voice is in the simple present tense, like Sita eats an apple, or Rohit waters the plant. From this, can you understand the tense of the active voice? Rohit waters the plants. What is the tense of this sentence?
Waters.
No, no, no. Tell me the tense, whether it is in the simple present tense or past tense or future tense.
Simple present tense.
Yeah, so it is in the simple present tense, right? So when your active voice is in the simple present tense, its structure looks like subject, right? Rohit is our subject. Root form of verb is water. Okay, and then object. This is your structure of active voice in simple present tense. Understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Any other doubt? Okay. So now let's move to the next tense. If your active voice is in present continuous tense, then your active voice will be having the structure like subject plus is, am, or are plus ing form of verb. Okay, as it is in the continuous tense, your verb will be having ing form. Okay, plus object. This is gonna be your subject structure in present continuous tense for active voice. Okay, when you change that into the passive voice, your substructure becomes object plus is, am, are, as you're having the auxiliary verb in your active voice. The same you have to retain in your passive voice. Plus you have to put being in your passive voice. Okay, understood everybody? Always remember, when you have continuous tense, whether it be a present continuous, past continuous, or future continuous, make use of being in your passive voice. Okay, so again the third rule is use V3 form of verb. Okay, this is your rule number 3. And then rule number 4, like put subject in the place of object and use by before the subject. Clear everybody?
Ma'am,
Yes.
is it compulsory to use being in past or
Yes,
present?
yes, very compulsory. Okay, when you are converting present continuous tense into the passive voice, using being is very compulsory. Then the sentence wouldn't be correct. Okay. Now, if let us say the example of this present continuous tense. Okay, she is cooking food. This is our active voice in present continuous tense. Is cooking. We have ing. Okay, so it is present continuous tense. So now when you convert that into the passive voice, first what you have to do, you have to put the object in subject's place and use the same auxiliary verb that is there in your active voice. As it is in the ing form, use being. Okay, is being. So this is our rule number 2. And then cooked is V3 is our cooked. Okay, so this is our rule number 3. And then she becomes her in your passive voice. Okay, this is rule number 4 and put by before it. So she is cooking food. Food is being cooked by her. This is how you have to change. Yes.
Ma'am, we need to not change the place of the like the by in the or
No,
be.
no. By should be before object in your passive voice. The place of by will never change. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
And you can identify whether the sentence is active or passive depending on this by only. Okay. This is very important to recognize or to differentiate the active voice or passive voice. You'll have by in your passive voice. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, now let's move to the present perfect tense. If your active voice is in the present perfect tense, then the active voice will have the structure like subject plus has or have. When you have perfect tense, then you can use has or have as helping verbs in your tense, okay, in your sentence. Now, past participle form of verb. You'll have V3 form of verb only in your active voice, okay, if you are having present perfect tense as in your active voice, okay, plus object. This is the structure of your active voice in present perfect tense. Okay. Now, when you change that into the passive voice, your structure looks like object plus has or have. Okay. The way you have it in your active voice, retain that in your passive voice plus being. This is very important again. When you're having perfect tense, whether it be a present perfect, past perfect, or future perfect, use being in your passive voice. Like how we are using being in your continuous tense, use being in your perfect tense. Okay, in passive voice. Now the same rule, use V3 form of verb plus by plus subject. Okay, let us see the example. Yes,
In present perfect tense or past
yes.
perfect tense, the
Mhm.
have, has, and have will never change, right? In
Yeah,
active.
they will never change. They will never. You have to use has or have depending upon your subject. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
But ma'am, I have a doubt.
Hmm.
Actually, in past perfect tense, we have to use had, right? In place
No,
of
no,
had
no.
or have.
Yeah, in past perfect, you have to use had. Okay, past perfect, use had. You're talking about present only, no? So in present, always use either has or have, no had. Okay.
Okay,
In
ma'am.
past only, you have to use had. Clear?
Yeah.
Okay. So now let us see the example. The car has hit an old man. Okay. So this is our subject, has, as per the present perfect tense, our auxiliary verb. Okay. Hit is the V3 form of verb and old man is our object here. So now when we convert that into the passive voice, put this in your subject's place. Okay. And old man and retain the has. Okay. This is rule number 2. And when you have has or have, what I told you, use been in your passive voice. So put been with has, okay? And old man has been, okay? This is your rule number 2. Now, hit, the V3 form of hit is again hit only. So this is our rule number 3. And then the card is our object now. And put by before it according to the rule number 4. Clear, everybody? The car has hit an old man and old man has been hit by the car is the passive voice. Clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now, if you have past tense in your active voice, then what is the structure and what are the rules that you have to follow? So if you have past tense, that is past indefinite tense or simple past tense. Okay. So their active voice will have the structure like subject plus past tense form of verb. That means V2 form of verb plus object. That's going to be your structure in your past tense. Okay. Then when you convert that into the passive voice, then the structure looks like object plus was or were. Okay, here you have to use auxiliary verbs as was or were. If it is singular, use was. If the subject is plural, use were. Okay, this is rule number 2. And then use V3 form of verb. Okay, and then by plus subject. Okay, so if you notice, this will remain same in all the tenses. The thing is, you have to interchange the subject and object. Okay, put object in place of subject, put subject in place of object. This is same in all the tenses. Okay, only thing is the auxiliary verbs plus the third form of verb. Again, third form of verb is also same in all the tenses. Okay, so major role what you can understand is the auxiliary verbs are playing important role here. Okay, so let's see the example. Rohit bought a laptop. What is the tense of this active voice?
Past.
Yeah, simple past tense. Okay. So now when you change that into the passive voice, it becomes like a laptop. So as it is singular, use was. Okay. A laptop was again bought by Rohit. Okay. Rule number 3 and this is our rule number 4. Clear, everyone?
Ma'am, doubt.
Yes.
Ma'am, the whole past tense of verb V2, right, ma'am? Means V2 form only, right, ma'am?
Sorry, what?
In active voice, they told past
Hmm.
subject plus past tense of verb V2
Hmm.
plus
Yes.
object.
Yes.
Past tense of verb V2 means normal V2 form only, right, ma'am?
Yeah, V1 or V2 form. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Unless it is perfect tense, you'll use V1 or V2. Okay. Other in case of perfect tense, you have to use V3. Okay. Clear? Yes. Okay. So Rohit bought a laptop. A laptop was bought by Rohit. This is the passive voice. Okay. Now, if we move to the past continuous tense. Okay. So the structure of active voice will be like subject plus was or were plus ing form of verb. Okay. As it is continuous tense, definitely you are going to have ing form of verb. Okay. Plus object. Now, if you convert that into the passive voice, the structure looks like object plus was or were. I've told you when you have continuous tense, whether it be a past or present, you have to use being, right? So here we are using that thing. Object plus was or were plus being plus past participle form of verb, V3 form of verb, then by plus subject. Okay. For example, Rahul was cleaning the car. Okay. So definitely this is in the past continuous tense, right? So when you convert that into the passive voice, according to this structure, it looks like the car was being cleaned by Rohit. Clear, everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now,
Yes.
when you have past perfect tense, then what is the structure? The active voice will have the structure like subject plus had. See, here we are using had as your,
Ma'am.
yes?
Ma'am, I did not understand past continuous tense. Passive
Past
voice.
tense. Okay, okay. So this is your past continuous tense. Okay. So what I've told you, when you have past continuous tense in your active voice, when you have to change that into the passive voice. Okay. So what you have to do, first thing is like place the object in the subject's place. Right. Yes, we did that one. Now we have to retain this same auxiliary verb that is there in your active voice. Okay. Like depending upon object on your object, whether it is singular, use was. If it is a plural, then use were. Okay. Next, when you have continuous tense, I've told you to use being in your passive voice with auxiliary verbs. Okay. So we are doing that, was or were plus being. Okay. Now the verb should be in the V3 form. Plus the fourth rule, by and subject. Okay, like Rahul was cleaning the car. Okay, so definitely this subject was the auxiliary verb. Yes,
Okay, ma'am.
understood? Okay, good. So now when you have the past perfect tense, the structure is like subject plus had to be used with past perfect tense. Okay, now past participle form of verb, that is V3 form of verb. Okay, unless and until you have simple present tense, you have to use either V1 or V2. But once you come across this perfect tense, okay, always use V3 form of verb in your active voice. Okay, and then object. Now the passive voice of this
We need
becomes,
to use only a V3 form.
yeah, when you have perfect tense, okay, whether it be a present perfect, past perfect, or future perfect, always use V3 in your active voice. Okay, that will be in active V3 form only. Okay, perfect means V3 form. Got it? Now, if we change that into the passive voice, the structure looks like object plus had. And when we have perfect, what I've told you, use been. Okay? Whether it be a present perfect or past perfect or future perfect, use been in your passive voice along with had. Okay? Object plus had plus been. Then V3 form of verb. Then by and subject. Okay, for example, she had won the first prize. Okay, she is our subject, then we have had, then this is the V3 form of verb, then the object thing. Okay, then when we convert this into the passive voice, it becomes like the first prize had been won by her. She changes to her here. Understood, everyone?
Voice.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am.
Ma'am, can
Okay,
you please explain for the passive one once more?
this one, past perfect.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so for the past perfect tense, you'll be having the structure in your active voice like subject plus had plus V3 form of verb plus object. This is going to be your structure in active voice for the past perfect tense. Okay. When you
Okay.
change that into the passive voice, the structure should be object plus had plus be plus third form of verb plus by and subject. Okay. According to this, those four rules that we have learned. Okay. So
Okay.
now you take this example, she had won the first prize. So basically, this is in the past perfect tense, right? She is there as subject, had is there as your auxiliary verb, and won as V3 form of verb, and this first prize as your object. So definitely, this is in your past perfect tense. Okay. So now when you
Okay.
change that into your passive voice, it becomes like the first prize just by putting this object in your subject's place. Okay, according to the rule number 1, and then retain the same helping verb that is there in your present passive voice. Okay, and then as it is the perfect tense, use been in your passive voice. Okay, so had been is your rule number 2, and then rule number 3 says use V3 form of verb, and then rule number 4, put the object in your subject in your object's place. So she changes to her. Clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now comes the future indefinite tense, or you can call it like future simple tense. Okay, simple future tense. So for that, your structure in active voice will be like subject plus will or shall. Basically, future tense is identified by this helping verbs, right? Will or shall. Plus root form of verb. It will be in the V1 form of verb. Root form means V1 form of verb plus object. Okay, this is your structure for future indefinite tense. Okay, when you find this in your active voice, then Your passive voice should be in the structure like object plus will or shall plus be. Please remember this thing. With will and shall, you have to use be in your passive voice. Okay. Then use V3 form of verb. Okay. Then followed by and subject. For example, I will cut the fruit. Okay. So will is there. So definitely this is our future tense, right? When you have the simple future tense, then in your passive voice, first thing is interchange the subject and object. So put the object in the subject's place, the fruits, and return this will in your passive voice and use be. I've told you to use be, right? So use be here, and then the V3 form of verb is cut only, right? Then by and me according to the rule number 4. Understood everyone? Yes?
Ma'am,
Yeah.
I got a
Yes,
doubt.
ma'am.
Suppose if they gave a sentence in the passive voice, we
Hmm.
need to change it to active voice. The
Yes?
formula used by passive voice, like the structure used by
Yeah.
passive voice, we need to change it same
Active.
structure
Same.
to
See,
active voice.
if you're, yeah, if you're given this thing, okay, this thing is given, you are telling, right? If this is given, then convert this simply into this form. Okay?
Same form.
Same thing, same formula you can use. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay. Now, so the second thing is you can't convert future continuous tense into the passive voice. Okay, that will be grammatically incorrect. Okay, we can't convert future continuous tense into the passive voice. Okay, now we have future perfect tense. So for future perfect tense, the active voice will have the structure like subject plus will or shall as it is future tense, and as it is perfect tense, use have. Okay, now use V3 form of verb and then object as per the structure. Okay. When you find this tense in your active voice, your subject or your structure for passive voice should be object plus will plus have, and as it is perfect tense, use been. Okay. This thing should be remembered forever. Okay. So use been with have plus V3 form of verb and by plus subject. Okay. Clear everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, for example, our team will have announced the list of players. So here, our team is our subject. You have will and have. So definitely it is in the future perfect tense, right? V3 is your announced and the list of players. Okay, when you convert these into your passive voice, place the object in the subject's place, the list of players. Okay, then use the same auxiliary verbs, will have, and as it is perfect tense, use been with your will have. Okay, and then V3 form of verb, then by our team. Okay, put this subject in your object
So
place.
every passive voice
Yes,
conversion, we need to confirmly keep by before the subject.
sorry, what? We need to
For every passive voice
hmm,
conversion,
conversion. Hmm.
we need to keep by
Yeah,
before
by.
the
In your
subject.
passive voice, you should use by. Okay, then only you can identify the given tense, given voices in passive voice. Okay,
Okay.
clear everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes.
any doubts
Yes,
from
ma'am.
anybody? Yes, no doubts?
No doubts.
Okay, students.